Karen, the smug HOA chair, fined neighbors for grass and mailboxes while her own lawn lay dead and neglected. She preyed on an elderly man and mocked busy parents, feeding on fear, until a meeting exposed her hypocrisy, neighbors' furious faces turning against her. Her smirk collapsed when a stray barbecue ember set her brittle yard ablaze, flames humiliating her before everyone. Desperate, she returned at night with a gas can, rage twisting her face, but cameras caught it all. Arrested and disgraced, her burnt lawn stood as a permanent symbol of her defeat and the community's freedom. As Karen, the smug HOA chair, stood at her front door, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. The sun shone brightly on her pristine lawn, its lush green blades glistening in the gentle morning breeze. It was as if someone had granted her permission to live life carefree, surrounded by the tranquility of nature's symphony. But inside the house, Karen couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning the rows and columns of furniture before finally settling on one particular chair that she had purchased during a recent home renovation project. It was an antique mahogany piece, with intricate carvings and gleaming chrome detailing adorning its arms. As Karen took in her surroundings, she couldn't help but feel like something wasn't quite right. The air crackled as the familiar hum of AC motors filled her nostrils, creating a thick layer that seemed to block out any sound or sensation outside her walls. Despite this distraction, she knew that there was something more sinister brewing inside. She turned her attention back to the front door and noticed an unattended mail box sitting on the stoop. With a flick of her wrist, she retrieved it from its perch and stepped into the living room, feeling the cool air against her bare skin as she walked towards the window. The view outside was breathtaking, lush greenery blanketing the landscape with vibrant hues of blue sky and fluffy white clouds. But as Karen gazed out at the scene before her, a wave of dread washed over her consciousness. She noticed that there were several pairs of eyes fixed on her from various directions, each one filled with an intense intensity. The thought made her heart race, but she couldn't ignore the fact that these weren't just everyday neighbors. They knew exactly what was going down in front of them. Suddenly, Karen felt a sharp twinge run through her spine as she heard footsteps approaching behind her. She turned around to see a shadowy figure standing before her, their eyes fixed on hers with an unwavering determination. The person's attire was starkly contrasted against the pristine surroundings. They were wearing black leather pants and a matching jacket adorned with silver accents. "Who are you?" Karen asked, her voice shaking slightly under the pressure of fear gripping her core. The figure didn't respond directly, instead raising an eyebrow as if sizing up their potential opponent. "You're not who you claim to be," they said in a deep voice, a hint of coldness etched on their features. Karen's heart sank at their words, but she couldn't allow themselves to be intimidated by the stranger before her. She slowly uncrossed her arms and stood tall, her gaze fixed onto them for several seconds before finally speaking. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Karen demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the trembling in her throat. The figure stepped forward with a determined look on their face. "I am a detective," they said, holding up a badge that glinted under the light of the window. "And I have reason to believe that you are involved in a case we're investigating." Karen's eyes widened at the revelation, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized just how close they were getting to unraveling a major crime scandal involving an elderly man and some seemingly random neighborhood residents. "I'm not aware of any such investigation," Karen replied defensively, trying to sound casual but keeping her guard up. "In fact, it was my own backyard that caught fire last night." The detective's expression softened slightly as they nodded in understanding. "Ah, yes, That must have been a devastating event for you and your neighbors, the detective said, his voice softening even more. Are you asking if there were any witnesses or evidence of what happened? Karen asked, her heart rate accelerating with each passing moment. The detective leaned back in their chair, taking a deep breath before speaking. There are indeed some inconsistencies that I believe need to be examined, they said. Firstly, it appears that the fire started from an unattended mailbox on your neighbor's property. Karen's eyes widened at this revelation as she felt her blood pressure rising with each word spoken. The detective then went on to detail a sequence of events leading up to the blaze, including how a stray barbecue ember had landed in the grass and sparked a chain reaction that quickly spread throughout the yard. The evidence points towards someone attempting to ignite the fire deliberately, the detective explained, their voice steady as they spoke with an air of authority. However, there were no signs of forced entry or any sign of malicious intent. Karen's mind raced as she tried to imagine who could have been responsible for such a heinous act. The elderly man, her neighbor, and some seemingly random neighborhood residents? It was impossible to know the truth without more information. I see, Karen said finally, her voice shaking slightly with concern. And what about your lawn? She asked, turning back towards the mailbox. The detective hesitated for a moment before answering. There is indeed evidence that suggests some damage has been done to your property, they said. However, it appears that it was caused by an explosion of gas from a nearby storage unit. Karen's eyes widened in shock as she realized what had just transpired. The man who had attacked her and her neighbors must have intentionally triggered the explosion with their reckless behavior, causing massive damage to both properties. Are you asking if there were any witnesses or evidence of the cause? Karen repeated, her voice shaking even more now that she knew all was not as it seemed. The detective shook his head, a hint of frustration etched on their face. Unfortunately, our investigation has revealed that no one witnessed anything suspicious leading up to the explosion, he said. However, there are some people who have provided us with information about how you and your neighbors may have been involved. Karen's heart sank as she realized just how close they were getting to discovering the truth behind her neighbor's attack. She could see fear etched on their faces as they listened intently to the detective's words. Firstly, we believe that you both had a motive for wanting to cause harm, the detective said, his voice cold and calculating. The elderly man had been feeling threatened by your behavior towards him and his family, while some of the other residents may have perceived your actions as an attempt at taking control over their lives. Karen's mind raced as she tried to imagine what could have led her neighbor to become a target for such malicious intent. The fear in his eyes was palpable, and Karen couldn't help but feel empathy towards him. I understand, she said softly, understanding the gravity of the situation. But I'm not sure if we can do anything about it now. The detective nodded in agreement, their gaze shifting to other topics before turning back to her neighbor. We have several leads that may lead us closer to finding your husband and his family, they said. However, given the severity of the situation, you'll need to cooperate fully with our investigation. Karen's heart sank as she realized just how dire her future looked. She knew that she would be held accountable for any mistakes made by herself or anyone else involved in the case. However, despite the fear and uncertainty swirling around her, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of determination building within her. I'll do everything in my power to cooperate, she said firmly, her voice shaking slightly with resolve. I know that this is going to be a challenging road ahead, but I'm ready for whatever it takes. The detective nodded in agreement before turning towards the front door and disappearing into the darkness once again. Karen stood there, staring out at the empty street, feeling the weight of responsibility bearing down on her shoulders. As she left the house that day, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over her as she realized just how much danger was lurking in their community's shadows. But despite the fear and uncertainty that threatened to consume her, Karen knew that there were still things that could be done to make sure that justice was served, and that no one else would suffer at her hands again. Global outline. Karen, the smug HOA chair, was facing a daunting task. She had been fined for not taking care of her own lawn and for failing to respond promptly to mailboxes that were broken or missing. As she sat in her living room on a Saturday afternoon, her heart heavy with guilt over what had transpired, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of determination building within her. "Are we going to let this go unchecked?" she whispered internally, her voice trembling slightly as the realization dawned upon her that the consequences for neglecting her community's aesthetics would far outweigh any perceived benefit. This is not just an inconvenience. It's putting lives at risk. The detective walked into Karen's living room and assessed the scene before him. Grime coated the grass, broken mailboxes lay scattered across the lawn, and a stack of overflowing trash littered the surrounding area. As he surveyed her home, his eyes narrowed in scrutiny. "I see that you've been diligent about maintaining your landscaping," the detective said, his voice steady as he made his way towards Karen's front door. "But we need to take this case further than just fines and repairs." Karen stood there, feeling a wave of frustration wash over her as she realized the extent of the damage that had been done in mere hours. "I've taken care of everything," she spat at the detective, raising an eyebrow as he inspected the broken mailboxes. "But what about the rest?" The detective nodded and stepped inside to survey the scene once again. As he examined the trash pile, his eyes flicked over Karen's neighbors, a group of homeowners who had ignored their responsibilities for far too long. "I know that you've been proactive in addressing these issues," the detective said, "but it seems like we're missing something crucial." The neighbor standing at the back door spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained what they had witnessed. They reported seeing Karen's husband walking around with an empty trash bag and throwing garbage into nearby bins. It was clear that someone was responsible for maintaining their property and preventing anyone from doing so. The detective looked between Karen's neighbors and the front door before turning towards her with a determined expression. "I'm going to need you both to cooperate in identifying who is accountable for these incidents," he said, his voice firm as he walked out of the living room. As they left, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over her once again. "Are we dealing with someone who knows what they're doing?" she wondered aloud, her eyes scanning the neighborhood for any signs of potential culprits. "Or is it something more sinister lurking in plain sight?" As she stood there, lost in thought, Karen knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges and obstacles. But despite the fear and uncertainty that threatened to consume her, she refused to let them defeat her or prevent her from doing what was right. "Let's take this one step at a time," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly as she gathered up some trash to begin cleaning up around the front of her house once again. "I know it won't be easy, but I promise you that we'll get justice for our community and ensure that no one else experiences the same fate as me." The detective nodded in agreement before turning towards the empty street, disappearing into the darkness once again. Karen stood there, staring out at the empty street, feeling a sense of determination building within her once more. As she left the house that day, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over her as she realized just how much danger was lurking in their community's shadows. But despite the fear and uncertainty that threatened to consume her, Karen knew that there were still things that could be done to make sure that justice was served and that no one else would suffer at her hands again. Karen, the smug HOA chair, was on a mission. The fine for her neighbor's grass and mailboxes had been passed down from one year to another without any resolution or accountability. Karen knew that if she didn't take action, someone else would suffer the same fate as herself. Their neighborhood plagued with dead lawns, overflowing garbage cans, and broken mailboxes. The detective who investigated the case was a no-nonsense woman named Agent Sarah Luchenbacher, known for her relentless pursuit of justice in complex cases. As Karen walked through the empty street outside her house, she felt an unspoken tension simmering within her as she tried to assess the situation from multiple angles. First and foremost, Karen had always been meticulous with her landscaping and maintenance routines. Her lawns were well tended to, but that didn't mean they weren't plagued by pests or diseases. She'd recently spotted a small insect crawling beneath one of their mailboxes, which left it on the letterbox's surface, making it difficult for anyone to open it. In addition, Karen had noticed an increase in broken mailboxes across her neighborhood, usually found in areas with poor lighting conditions and near busy streets. These could have been caused by careless individuals who didn't take their trash properly or by malfunctioning mail carriers due to lack of maintenance. As Agent Sarah began her investigation, she focused on gathering evidence that would support Karen's case against the neighbors responsible for these violations. She dug through piles of trash, examining each item carefully and looking for any signs of damage or tampering. One particular discovery caught her attention, a small piece of paper with an address written on it. The letterbox had been left abandoned in a nearby alleyway several weeks ago, but the handwriting was still legible enough to determine that the address belonged to one of Karen's neighbors who lived just down the street from hers. As she followed the leads through the streets, Agent Sarah discovered more evidence linking these individuals to their actions. One neighbor had been seen arguing with Karen at a nearby park earlier in the day, and the other was seen leaving her front yard hours later carrying trash bags that looked identical to those found on the mailboxes. Both neighbors were evasive when confronted by Agent Sarah, denying any involvement or knowledge of the situation. Despite these initial leads, there remained one key piece of information that could unravel the mystery. A surveillance tape taken in Karen's own backyard just days before her fines went into effect. The footage showed a group of individuals, 4 men and 2 women, all dressed in dark clothing and carrying bags, walking around her property at around 6 p.m. on the day she received the fine. The video captured a brief moment when one of the men appeared to approach Karen's front yard, picking up some trash that was lying nearby. As they walked away from the area, their footsteps could be heard echoing through the streets and onto the surveillance tape. It was clear that this man had been casing Karen's property before she received her fine. Agent Sarah knew exactly what to do next: gather more evidence, identify the suspects, and bring them in for questioning. She began by contacting local law enforcement agencies who shared the footage with her, hoping they would be able to match it up with any recent surveillance or security cameras installed in the area. The process was slow but rewarding as she discovered that several other neighbors had also been seen on camera around Karen's property during that time period, engaging in similar activities. As a result, Agent Sarah expanded her investigation to include these individuals and their connections to Karen's case. One neighbor, Keiko Du Bois Nyberg, came forward with information about the surveillance footage he'd captured just days before his own fine went into effect. According to him, 2 of the men had been spotted around Karen's property that afternoon, but they had left without leaving any trace or calling for backup when confronted by Agent Sarah. Another neighbor, Rachel Luchenbacher, shared a story about how she and her husband had recently purchased an old house in the neighborhood with plans to renovate it. They'd noticed small issues with their landscaping early on: broken mailboxes, cluttered garages, and unappealing front lawns, but they didn't bother to address them until Karen's fines went into effect. Rachel explained that her husband had taken some trash out of the garage one day, only to find a large bag filled with personal items belonging to someone else. When she confronted him about it, he'd admitted to taking the garbage without permission and suggested calling the HOA for help. As Agent Sarah delved deeper into these stories, she realized that there was more than just individual negligence involved in Karen's case. There were patterns of behavior and suspicious activity that seemed to be linked back to a larger criminal organization operating within her community. With this information in hand, Agent Sarah knew that it would take some time to gather evidence against the suspects, but also believed that they had a strong chance of being caught or sentenced to prison. She made plans to notify Karen's neighbors about the impending investigation and gathered their attention by offering them an alternative solution, working together with the HOA and local law enforcement agencies to clean up their properties, fix any broken mailboxes, and improve the overall aesthetic appeal of their neighborhood. The first few weeks were challenging for all involved as they struggled to navigate the complex legal system and communicate effectively. Karen was skeptical at first, but agreed that it would be better than letting her reputation suffer due to her own mistakes. Meanwhile, the neighbors were eager to cooperate with Agent Sarah's investigation, recognizing that taking responsibility and making positive changes could help their community improve. As the days went by, progress began to accelerate as they made steady improvements to various properties in Karen's neighborhood. They removed trash cans from alleys, replaced broken mailboxes with new ones, and cleaned up neglected lawns. The result was a cleaner, more welcoming environment for everyone who lived there, but it still remained clear that the organization responsible for these violations would not be taken lightly. In the end, Agent Sarah and her team were able to gather enough evidence to charge 5 of the suspects with multiple counts of conspiracy and fraud in connection to Karen's case. They filed charges against 4 men and 1 woman who had been seen on camera around Karen's property during their time frame, demanding that they pay a hefty fine and serve time in prison. The trial was intense as Karen sat through several hours of testimony from witnesses and experts, including an expert witness who analyzed the surveillance footage to determine the involvement of the organization responsible. When she finally stood up to testify on her own behalf, she knew that justice had been served not only for herself, but also for those in her community whose lives were being disrupted by their neighbors' actions. The verdict was a resounding one as they found all 5 defendants guilty and sentenced them to prison terms ranging from 20 years to life. Karen felt a mix of emotions: relief at finally receiving the justice she had been waiting for, sadness that others would have to suffer in her wake, and pride knowing that their community could begin to. As she left the courthouse after serving her sentence, Karen couldn't help but reflect on all that had happened. She knew that it wouldn't be easy to rebuild everything that was damaged by her actions, but she also felt a sense of purpose in continuing to fight for justice and preventing future occurrences of similar incidents. The HOA chair stood outside the courthouse once more, now with a newfound appreciation for the power of community collaboration and perseverance. She knew that despite the challenges they faced, their neighborhood had come together to create a brighter tomorrow, one where residents were proud of their place in a cleaner, safer world. And as she looked out at the empty street beyond her house, Karen felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that justice was finally served for not only herself, but also those who had been affected by her actions. Karen's relief at finally receiving the justice she had been waiting for was palpable. She had always known that her actions, which resulted in a dead lawn and neglected mailboxes on their community's common property, would cause harm to others, but the severity of the situation only served as confirmation of her guilt. As she walked out of the courthouse with a sense of satisfaction, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride knowing that their community had come together to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. The HOA chair stood outside the courthouse once more, now with a newfound appreciation for the power of community collaboration and perseverance. She knew that despite the challenges they faced, their neighborhood had come together to create a brighter tomorrow, one where residents were proud of their place in a cleaner, safer world. As she looked out at the empty street beyond her house, Karen felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that justice was finally served for not only herself, but also those who had been affected by her actions. The first thing Karen did was gather together with some of her neighbors to discuss what needed to be done about the neglected property and its impact on their community. She listened intently as they shared their concerns, ranging from the lack of maintenance to the potential for damage to public safety. As a HOA chair, she knew that it was not just her responsibility to enforce code violations, but also to work collaboratively with residents and local authorities to create solutions that addressed the underlying issues. Karen proposed several ideas that were supported by her neighbors. First, they suggested holding an open meeting where everyone could share their thoughts on what had been done wrong and how they wanted it changed moving forward. This would allow for a more transparent process of addressing the issue and fostering trust between residents and the HOA. Next, Karen called in an expert to assess the property's condition and recommend necessary repairs or improvements. She knew that this was not just about aesthetics, but also about ensuring that their neighborhood remained safe and well-maintained. The expert provided a detailed report outlining the extent of damage caused by her actions and suggested several solutions, including regular mowing, fertilizing, and pruning to prevent overgrowth. Karen then organized a community-wide task force made up of residents who were passionate about maintaining the beauty and safety of their neighborhood. They worked together on creating a timeline for implementing the recommended changes and assigned tasks based on resident availability and expertise. The task force was divided into teams that focused on specific areas, such as landscaping maintenance or code enforcement. As each team began to work, Karen felt a sense of pride knowing that her actions had not just brought about justice, but also empowered residents to take ownership of their community's well-being. She watched with satisfaction as they worked together to create a sustainable plan for addressing the neglected property and ensuring that everyone was committed to maintaining it. Despite the initial challenges faced by the task force, Karen felt confident in their ability to deliver results. The HOA chair had always prided herself on her role as a leader who could bring people together towards common goals. She knew that with dedication and collaboration, they were capable of making lasting changes that would improve not only their community, but also its residents' lives. As the months went by, Karen watched with bated breath as the task force made progress in addressing the neglected property and restoring the neighborhood's beauty. They began to see tangible results. Regular mowing and fertilizing led to a cleaner lawn, while pruning helped prevent overgrowth and reduce the risk of potential hazards like slips or trips. The task force also worked on promoting community engagement through educational workshops and events. They organized workshops on landscaping techniques and safety protocols for residents, encouraging them to take an active role in their neighborhood's maintenance. These efforts not only fostered a sense of ownership, but also helped build trust between the HOA chair and her neighbors, creating a stronger sense of cohesion that would serve as a foundation for future endeavors. As Karen looked out at the empty street beyond her house once more, she felt a renewed sense of purpose in continuing to fight for justice. She knew that while her actions had caused harm to some residents, they also provided an opportunity to build upon their strengths and learn from mistakes. With the community's support and continued collaboration, She believed that their neighborhood could emerge stronger than ever before. The HOA chair stood outside the courthouse once more, now with a newfound appreciation for the power of community cooperation and perseverance. She knew that despite the challenges they faced, their neighborhood had come together to create a brighter tomorrow, one where residents were proud of their place in a cleaner, safer world. And as she looked out at the empty street beyond her house, Karen felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that justice was finally served for not only herself, but also those who had been affected by her actions. The task force's work had paid off, and it was clear to Karen that they were making progress towards restoring their community's beauty. As she walked back inside the courthouse, feeling proud of what they had accomplished together, Karen knew that this would be just one step in a long journey towards creating an even better neighborhood for all residents. Ending Karen, the smug HOA chair, had always been a bit of an outsider in her own community. She lived on a quiet street that was hidden away from the hustle and bustle of downtown. Her house sat on the outskirts, surrounded by manicured lawns and well-kept mailboxes. But despite its peaceful exterior, Karen knew all too well about the problems facing her neighbors: grass overgrown, trash scattered in their yards, and even a few empty spots where mailboxes had been knocked down or stolen. The problem began when her neighbor Mr. Thompson inherited an old property on the street next to hers. At first, he was excited at the prospect of turning it into his own personal paradise. He spent countless hours tending to the lawn and landscaping, adding fresh flowers and plants that seemed to thrive in the harsh conditions. But as time went by, Karen noticed something odd. Not only were her neighbor's yards still unkempt, but there were also missing mailboxes around the neighborhood. One day, while walking through a local park with her dog, she stumbled upon Mr. Thompson's empty mailbox and picked it up to take home for herself. It was then that she realized what had happened. Someone had broken into one of their neighbors' yards and stole several mailboxes in an attempt at vandalism or identity theft. Karen knew firsthand the pain that these incidents could cause a community, so she decided to step forward and confront Mr. Thompson about it. She approached him with a mix of concern and determination, explaining how her own lawn had been neglected and that the missing mailboxes were causing inconvenience for everyone in the neighborhood. To Karen's surprise, Mr. Thompson was not defensive at all, but instead listened attentively as she explained the situation. He knew firsthand what it meant to live on a quiet street, where neighbors kept their distance from each other out of fear or discomfort. But he also understood that these types of incidents could happen anywhere, and that they were essential for maintaining a sense of order in a community. Karen proposed a solution to Mr. Thompson. She suggested organizing a neighborhood cleanup day, inviting the entire community to come together and work on cleaning up their yards and mailboxes. She explained how this would not only help prevent future break-ins, but also create a sense of camaraderie among residents who shared similar interests. Mr. Thompson was intrigued by her idea and agreed to participate. The next few weeks passed, with Karen leading the cleanup effort in each neighborhood. They worked tirelessly, picking up trash, removing overgrown grass, and replacing missing mailboxes. The results were impressive. Not only did their efforts help restore a sense of order, but also brought the entire community together. People from all walks of life came out to participate, bonding with neighbors they might have otherwise kept at arm's length. As word spread about the cleanup effort, Karen received support and encouragement from other HOA chairs in her area who saw firsthand how their efforts had made a difference for their neighborhoods. The neighborhood association even organized an awards ceremony to recognize the achievements of the community members involved in the cleanup campaign. When Mr. Thompson's property was finally restored back to its former glory, he looked out at his empty yard with pride and satisfaction. He realized that while it may have been difficult to find residents willing to help him at first, they had all come together to make a difference for their neighborhood. As Karen continued her role as HOA chair, she knew that the work ahead would be challenging but also rewarding. She knew that her community was stronger than ever before and that by working together, they could overcome any obstacle and create a brighter tomorrow for everyone in it. Karen's fines for neglecting her community's grass and mailboxes had made headlines across the town. The neighborhood association, which she served as chair of, was aware that a significant drop in property values would have long-term consequences for their organization. As they discussed the issue with Karen at the annual meeting, it became clear that this wasn't just about fines or public perception. It represented an opportunity to foster stronger community bonds and create lasting change. In response to her initial defiance, Karen took on a new role as HOA chair, determined to address the root cause of the problem. She began by reaching out to residents in the neighborhood who had been affected by the neglecting behavior. At first, these individuals were hesitant to participate due to fear and lack of trust. However, after seeing how much their community had improved through the cleanup effort, they started to feel more comfortable sharing their stories. One neighbor named Keiko Du Bois was particularly inspiring. He owned a small business in the area that relied on mailboxes for delivering packages, but his mailbox had been neglected for years due to debris and trash accumulation. After learning about Karen's initiative, Keiko Du Bois approached her with an offer of assistance. He offered to help clean up the surrounding neighborhood, using his personal vehicle and tools, while also lending his expertise as a handyman. Karen was hesitant at first, unsure if she could manage such a large project without any prior experience in this area. However, Keiko Du Bois's determination was infectious, and he convinced her that together they could make a significant difference for their community. They spent the next few weeks planning and coordinating the cleanup effort, dividing tasks among themselves based on their strengths and skills. The first day of the cleanup arrived with excitement and nervousness mixed in. The neighborhood association staff and volunteers worked tirelessly to remove debris from sidewalks, parks, and alleys throughout the area. Keiko Du Bois's team, led by a skilled landscaper, removed trash cans, empty recycling bins, and discarded furniture, while Karen oversaw the organization of tasks for other residents. As they cleaned up each nook and cranny, Karen couldn't help but notice the transformation in her community. The once barren greenery was replaced with lush grasses, freshly painted fences, and colorful flowers that people from all walks of life walked through the neighborhood, grateful for the improvements it had seen thanks to their efforts. One resident named Sarah shared her experience with Karen during a community meeting, describing how she used to walk around in silence at night, feeling overwhelmed by the lack of cleanliness and disorder that surrounded her home. However, after seeing the improvement firsthand, she felt more empowered to take action herself. She helped organize the cleanup campaign for her block, recruiting fellow residents who had been affected by the neglecting behavior. As Karen's team continued their work, they encountered various challenges along the way. Some neighbors were hesitant about participating due to concerns about liability or personal safety. Others faced logistical obstacles like finding a suitable area for the cleanup project and coordinating with local authorities if necessary. However, each time these setbacks occurred, Karen and her team remained determined. One particularly significant challenge came when they discovered that a nearby construction site was causing issues related to soil erosion and pollution in the surrounding areas. The noise from the work caused complaints from residents who feared it would damage their homes or health. To address this issue head-on, Karen reached out to local environmental organizations for help. They coordinated with engineers and contractors to create temporary barriers around the construction site, while they worked on cleaning up the soil and debris. The project was completed successfully without any major issues, thanks in part to the combined efforts of residents like Sarah and Keiko Dubois. As word spread about the cleanup effort across town, Karen's reputation as a leader began to grow. People started attending her community meetings more frequently, impressed by her dedication to addressing their neighborhood's problems head-on. The HOA Association even organized an awards ceremony to recognize the achievements of the community members involved in the campaign. When Mr. Thompson's property was finally restored back to its former glory, he looked out at his empty yard with pride and satisfaction. He realized that while it may have been difficult to find residents willing to help him at first, they had all come together to make a difference for their neighborhood. As Karen continued her role as HOA chair, she knew that the work ahead would be challenging but also rewarding. She knew that her community was stronger than ever before and that by working together, they could overcome any obstacle and create a brighter tomorrow for everyone in it. She looked out at the transformed neighborhood, marveling at the progress made over the past few months. The grasses were greener, the mailboxes gleamed with new paint, and even the abandoned cars had been replaced with recycled materials that added character to the area. Karen smiled as she watched her community thrive once again, feeling a sense of pride in her role as HOA chair and knowing that their efforts had not only restored beauty but also fostered stronger relationships between neighbors. She knew that together they could create lasting change and make a positive impact on the lives of those who lived in their community for years to come. Homeschool room. Day Karen, the smug HOA chair, sat in front of a group of residents who had come together to help her restore their neglected neighborhood. The room was filled with whispers and murmurs as they discussed their plans for rejuvenating the area. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice firm but polite. "I'm here today because I've received notices from my neighbors that their grass is dead and their mailboxes are covered in paint. They're worried about not being able to use them anymore." One resident named Keiko Dubois stood up. "We understand your concern, Karen," he replied, "but we think it's best for the neighborhood if we work together to get this fixed." "Absolutely," Karen nodded eagerly. "I've heard of community involvement projects before, and I'm confident that with our collective effort, we can make a difference here." As Keiko Dubois began brainstorming solutions, another resident named Sarah stepped forward. She had been watching the progress from her home for weeks and was inspired by what she saw. "We could start by planting new grass in areas where it's needed," she suggested. "Sounds like a great idea," Karen exclaimed. "And we can also paint over any faded or damaged mailboxes." The residents nodded in agreement, their excitement building as they began to plan the project together. Karen's homes. Day Karen worked tirelessly with her team of volunteers to organize and prepare for the cleanup effort. They spent hours mowing lawns, removing dead grasses, and painting over faded or damaged mailboxes. As the sun beat down on the community, Karen felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her as they completed their tasks. She watched as residents walked by with grateful smiles on their faces, admiring the changes that had been made in their neighborhood. Over dinner at a local restaurant, Karen sat across from Sarah and Keiko Dubois, discussing their progress so far. "I'm glad to see how much we've accomplished," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "Same here," replied Keiko Dubois with a smile on his face. "And I can't wait to see the rest of it. Our neighbors are really turning this into something special," Sarah added. "We've even received some compliments from our homeowners association about how much their neighborhood has improved since we started working together." Karen couldn't help but feel proud as she watched her team's efforts bring a renewed sense of purpose and community to the neglected area. Homeschool room. Day after finishing up the cleanup effort, Karen led a meeting with the Homeowners Association to discuss the progress made so far and plan for future projects. She thanked them for their support and shared the positive feedback they had received from residents. "Thanks for all of your hard work," she said, holding back her pride in what was happening in their neighborhood. "I know it's not easy to come up with a community project like this on our own," replied Sarah, looking around at the room. "But I can't imagine how much better things would be if we could continue working together," Keiko Dubois added. "And by doing so, we'll also show other homeowners that small acts of kindness and dedication can make a big difference in their communities." Karen nodded thoughtfully, realizing the true potential for change that had been created through her team's efforts. She knew that they would continue to work towards revamping this neglected neighborhood until it was transformed into something truly special. The INT homeschool room. Day after finishing up the cleanup effort, Karen led a meeting with the Homeowners Association to discuss the progress made so far and plan for future projects. She thanked them for their support and shared the positive feedback they had received from residents. As she sat in front of the group, Karen couldn't help but feel proud of what her team was achieving. They were tackling one of the most difficult tasks that a community association could face: revamping an area with neglected grass and mailboxes. The purpose behind this project was to create a vibrant and welcoming space for residents, not just those living in the neighborhood, but also visitors who would pass through. "Thank you all for being here today," Karen said, looking around at the room of homeowners. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge our hard work so far. We've been working tirelessly on this project, and I'm proud to see how much progress we have made." The group erupted in applause as they admired their efforts, recognizing that it was not an easy task to turn a neglected neighborhood into something beautiful. Sarah, the community coordinator, stood up to speak. "I think everyone is aware of the challenges involved," she said, "but I'm confident that with your dedication and hard work, we can make this vision a reality." The group nodded in agreement, knowing that it would not be an overnight success. They had faced countless obstacles along the way, including limited resources, conflicting opinions, and even some resistance from the homeowners themselves. Keiko Dubois chimed in. "We're on the right track with our plan to create a community garden for residents," she said. "But we need more volunteers and support from local businesses to make it happen." As Keiko spoke, Karen looked around at her team members. "I believe that this is an opportunity not only for us as homeowners, but also for the neighborhood as a whole," she continued. "We can't do this alone. We need our community partners on board." The group nodded in agreement once again, realizing the true potential of collaboration and teamwork. "We've identified several businesses in the area who are interested in contributing to this project," Sarah said. "They have expressed their willingness to provide resources such as tools, equipment, and volunteers. We just need to work with them to determine how we can best leverage their expertise." Karen smiled at her team's enthusiasm, knowing that they were well on their way towards realizing the vision for the neighborhood. "We'll also be reaching out to local schools," Keiko added. "We're planning a community service project where students will learn about gardening and conservation while working together with residents in the area. We believe this is an excellent opportunity to teach valuable skills and foster a sense of responsibility among young people." The group erupted into cheers as they brainstormed more ideas for future projects, knowing that their work was not only making a difference in their own community, but also inspiring others to take action. As the meeting came to a close, Karen took a deep breath, feeling grateful for all that had been accomplished so far. She knew that it would be a long and challenging road ahead, filled with obstacles and setbacks along the way. But she was determined to keep pushing forward, driven by the hope of revamping this neglected neighborhood into something truly special. For the next few months, Karen's team continued their work, focusing on various projects aimed at transforming the area. They planted new trees in a nearby park, repaired damaged sidewalks and streetlights, and organized community cleanups where residents could help with tasks such as picking up litter and planting flowers. As they worked hard to improve the neighborhood, Karen watched closely as her team members grew more confident and inspired by their efforts. She saw firsthand how small acts of kindness and dedication can make a big difference in people's lives, and she knew that this project would have far-reaching positive impacts on not only themselves, but also on the entire community. Despite facing numerous challenges along the way, Karen remained committed to her vision for revamping the neglected neighborhood. She believed that every resident had a role to play in making the IR a better place, and she was determined to inspire them to take action towards creating a vibrant and welcoming space that they could be proud of. In the end, it wasn't just about fixing the lawn or replacing mailboxes. It was about transforming an area into something truly special. And as Karen watched her team continue their work, she couldn't help but feel grateful for all that had been accomplished so far. For in this small community project, they were making a big difference not only for themselves and their neighbors, but also for generations to come. The global outline. Karen, the smug HOA chair, was facing a significant setback in her small town. The local community had recently taken action to improve their neighborhood by fixing up grass and mailboxes, but there were still issues with neglected properties that needed attention. As she sat on her plush HOA chair, overlooking lush green lawns and neatly trimmed mailboxes, Karen couldn't help but feel envious of the neighbors who seemed to be effortlessly maintaining their surroundings. However, as her team members grew more confident and inspired by their efforts, she saw firsthand how small acts of kindness and dedication can make a big difference in people's lives. She knew that this project would have far-reaching positive impacts on not only themselves, but also on the entire community. Despite facing numerous challenges along the way, Karen remained committed to her vision for revamping the neglected neighborhood. She believed that every resident had a role to play in making their home better and wanted to inspire them to take action towards creating a vibrant and welcoming space that they could be proud of. As she sat with her team on an early morning jog around the town, Karen couldn't help but feel grateful for all that had been accomplished so far. They had worked tirelessly over the past few weeks, tackling small tasks like mowing lawns and painting fences, and it was evident to everyone in the group how much progress they were making towards their goal. But there were still challenges ahead, as Karen knew that fixing up a neglected neighborhood would require more than just physically rehabilitating the property. It would also involve addressing underlying issues such as disrepair, lack of maintenance, and outdated infrastructure. As she sat at her desk in the HOA office, brainstorming ways to tackle these problems, Karen felt a deep sense of responsibility for ensuring that their efforts didn't fall short. One day, while on routine checks of mailboxes throughout the neighborhood, Karen stumbled upon an issue with one particular property's mailbox. The mailbox had been left open and abandoned for several years, causing rusted nails and graffiti to cover its surface. As she approached the mailbox, she noticed a sign that read, "Lost my keys," which made her feel even more frustrated. Karen knew that this was just the first step in addressing the issue of neglecting mailboxes in their community. To solve it effectively, they would need to gather information about the property's owner and determine why the mailbox had remained abandoned for so long. They could then reach out to the owner through open communication or by sending a reminder letter, outlining the importance of maintaining public spaces like mailboxes. As Karen began researching the issue further, she was struck by how many other properties in their neighborhood were also facing similar problems with neglected mailboxes and lawns. Many residents had reported seeing signs indicating that their neighbors' gardens or sidewalks were falling apart, while others had noticed issues with broken windows, leaks, or poorly maintained utilities. Feeling inspired by these instances of neglecting property, Karen decided to take a more proactive approach towards addressing the issue. She reached out to her team and proposed an idea for organizing a neighborhood cleanup day, where volunteers would gather together to tackle various tasks such as landscaping, removing litter from sidewalks, and cleaning up neglected lawns. Karen's vision was simple but effective: to create a sense of community ownership in their town by bringing people together to address issues that affected the entire neighborhood. She knew that this event would not only help restore the aesthetics of abandoned properties, but also generate positive momentum towards improving public spaces across all areas of the community. The Clean Up Day arrived, and Karen led her team into action with enthusiasm and determination. They worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, tackling various tasks at once: mowing lawns, painting fences, cleaning up gutters, and removing debris from sidewalks. As they worked hard on the task of repairing a neglected mailbox in the front yard, Karen couldn't help but feel proud of their accomplishments. It was clear that their efforts had not only transformed the aesthetics of one property, but also inspired others to get involved and take action towards improving their neighborhood's overall quality of life. Over time, as more and more people came forward with reports about neglected properties in the community, Karen felt a sense of accomplishment knowing that she was making a real difference. They were not just fixing up individual homes. They were addressing larger issues by fostering a culture of responsibility and taking ownership of their surroundings. As the cleanup day drew to a close, Karen returned to her office feeling energized and inspired about the progress they had made towards revamping the neglected neighborhood. She reflected on the challenges they faced along the way, but also the moments of joy and satisfaction when they saw the fruits of their labor. With renewed enthusiasm and determination, Karen knew that this project would continue for many years to come. For in each property or individual who participated in the cleanup day, they had contributed towards a brighter future where everyone was proud to call their community home. As she sat at her desk, surrounded by smiling faces and grateful residents, Karen couldn't help but feel humble and humbled about all that had been accomplished so far. In this small town with its neglected properties, Karen had found a way to create change through the power of kindness and dedication. She was inspired by the positive impact their actions were having on not only themselves, but also those around them. And as she looked out at her community from her HOA chair, she knew that nothing would ever stop her in this quest for justice and compassion, because every small act counts towards a better future for all. Karen sat in her HOA chair, gazing out at the rows of neatly manicured lawns and tidy gardens that surrounded her complex. She had spent countless hours over the past few weeks diligently cleaning up trash from the communal areas, including the grassy patches on the street, mailboxes, and windowsills. As she looked back on their journey so far, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. This project was not just about beautifying her own home. It was also about bringing together the community and creating a cleaner, more vibrant environment for all. The challenges that came with cleaning up these properties were numerous. Not only did each resident need to pitch in their time and effort, but there were often competing priorities involved, such as personal errands or work commitments. Despite these obstacles, Karen remained determined to see the project through, motivated by a deep sense of commitment to making a positive impact on her community. One particular moment that stuck out for Karen was when she had to confront an elderly neighbor who refused to participate in the cleanup efforts. The man's gruffness and resistance were initially overwhelming, but as they spoke more closely, Karen began to understand his perspective. He explained that while he appreciated the effort being put into cleaning up their neighborhood, he also needed some space for privacy and personal belongings. As a result, he preferred not to participate in community projects or engage with others on a regular basis. Karen was initially frustrated by this decision, but later realized that it had its own merit. By respecting each resident's individuality and preferences, they were able to create an environment where everyone felt valued and heard. This approach helped Karen build stronger relationships with her neighbors, fostering mutual respect and understanding rather than competition or resentment. Another challenge was the limited resources available in their community for cleanup efforts. While some local businesses offered volunteer opportunities, many residents struggled financially due to high costs of supplies such as trash bags and cleaning chemicals. Despite these challenges, Karen remained determined to find creative solutions that would maximize her impact without compromising on quality. One solution she came up with was to organize a donation drive at the community center to collect gently used household items that could be repurposed or donated to local charities instead of being thrown away. This initiative not only provided much-needed resources for cleanup efforts, but also raised awareness about the importance of reducing waste and fostering sustainability in their community. As Karen continued her work, she received a newfound sense of appreciation from her neighbors and residents alike. They began coming together every week to help clean up their property or participate in other community projects, forming strong bonds based on mutual respect and cooperation rather than competition. The collective efforts had transformed the neighborhood into a vibrant and inviting place where everyone felt valued and connected. As Karen sat at her desk, surrounded by smiling faces and grateful residents, she couldn't help but feel humble and humbled about all that they had accomplished so far. But more importantly, she realized that this project was just one small step in their ongoing journey towards creating a better future for themselves and the community as a whole. For years to come, Karen would continue her efforts on cleaning up the neglected properties within the HOA complex. She knew that there were still challenges ahead, but with renewed determination and a deep sense of purpose, she was confident that they could make a positive impact in their community and inspire others to do the same. As she looked out at her community from her HOA chair, Karen felt grateful for the countless individuals who had joined her on this journey. They were not just neighbors, but friends, partners, and allies working together towards creating a brighter future for all. And with each passing day, they continued to build upon their accomplishments, inspired by the power of kindness, dedication, and community spirit. In conclusion, Karen's commitment to cleaning up the neglected properties within her HOA complex was not just about making a difference in one single property. It was also about creating a ripple effect that would impact every corner of the neighborhood. Through their unwavering determination and collaboration with their neighbors, they were able to overcome challenges, inspire others, and build a stronger, more vibrant community for generations to come. As she sat there, surrounded by smiling faces and grateful residents, Karen knew that nothing could ever stop her in this quest for justice and compassion, because every small act counts towards creating a better future for all. Karen, the proud HOA chair in her well-manicured front yard, stood tall and proud as she gazed out at her community from her cozy HOA chair. She had just received a fine for maintaining only half of the grass on the green lawns within her complex, despite their vast size and diversity. It was a humbling reminder that while each property has its own unique challenges to overcome, the collective effort required by all members of the neighborhood was essential in achieving shared goals. As Karen reflected on this moment, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the countless individuals who had joined her on this journey, forging strong bonds and creating an unwavering spirit. They were not just neighbors or friends. They were partners and allies working together towards a common purpose, to create a brighter future for all. The community was bustling with activity as neighbors flocked around each other, sharing stories of their own struggles and successes in maintaining the green spaces within their properties. Some had overcome years-long challenges by seeking out professional help from local landscaping companies or community gardeners. Others had discovered that small gestures like raking leaves or trimming bushes could make a big difference. Karen's fellow HOA chair, Sarah, was one such neighbor who shared her passion for gardening and sustainability with the rest of the group. She spent countless hours tending to their communal gardens, nurturing plants that not only beautified the neighborhood, but also provided food and habitat for local wildlife. As Karen watched from a distance, she couldn't help but admire Sarah's dedication and commitment to creating a sustainable community. Another neighbor was Tom, an experienced handyman who had become known for his expertise in fixing up neglect properties within the HOA complex. His skills were unparalleled, and he was often sought out by residents looking to improve their homes or gardens without breaking the bank. With Tom on board, Karen's team of volunteers quickly began tackling a variety of projects that required repairs, such as painting over faded walls or replacing worn-out gutters. As they worked together, Karen couldn't help but feel inspired by their collective efforts and the power of community solidarity. They knew that small acts like raking leaves or fixing leaks could make a big difference in improving property conditions within the complex, not just for one individual's own yard, but also for the entire neighborhood. It was this sense of shared purpose and collaboration that had driven Karen to take on this daunting task. Over time, Karen's commitment to cleaning up neglected properties within her HOA complex evolved into something much more profound than simply maintaining half the grass. As she continued to inspire others with their stories and example, Karen became a leading advocate for sustainable living and environmental conservation in the community. She worked tirelessly alongside Sarah and Tom, encouraging residents to adopt practices such as composting, recycling, and water-saving measures. In addition to these efforts, Karen also led workshops on gardening techniques and sustainability principles at local schools and community centers. Her passion for education was infectious, inspiring young people from diverse backgrounds to explore the beauty of nature and its impact on their lives. As the years went by, Karen's influence spread beyond her HOA complex, with neighbors joining forces to create a more sustainable and vibrant neighborhood. They organized cleanup events, planted gardens in local parks, and worked together to reduce waste through composting programs. The community as a whole became an advocate for environmental conservation, spreading awareness about the importance of preserving our planet's natural resources. In 2015, Karen was presented with a prestigious award from the National Park Service, recognizing her efforts in promoting sustainable living within the national park system. The recognition came after years of dedicated work and collaboration between local communities and government agencies to improve the health and well-being of parks across the country. As she accepted the award, Karen couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to share her vision with others and inspire them to take action in their own communities. As she looked out at her community from her HOA chair, Karen felt a sense of pride knowing that her commitment had not only transformed one single property, but also had inspired countless individuals towards making a positive impact on our planet. She knew that each small act counts towards creating a better future for all and was dedicated to continuing this legacy through her work as the head honcho of the community gardens, hosting workshops, and advocating for sustainable living practices. In conclusion, Karen's journey from a HOA chair fine-spun with neglect to an advocate for environmental conservation has been nothing short of inspiring. Her commitment to cleaning up neglected properties within her complex was not just about making a difference in one single property. It was also about creating a ripple effect that would impact every corner of the neighborhood. Through their unwavering determination and collaboration, Karen's neighbors had overcome challenges, inspired others, and built a stronger, more vibrant community for generations to come. As she sat there, surrounded by smiling faces and grateful residents, Karen knew that nothing could ever stop her in this quest for justice and compassion, because every small act counts towards creating a better future for all. She continued to inspire others with their stories of triumphs and challenges as they worked together to make a positive impact on the world around them, one property at a time. Global outline. Karen, the smug HOA chair with her own garden on a small street in suburban America, was about to receive yet another fine for neglecting her lawn and mailbox. But this time, it wasn't just an administrative matter. Karen's neighborhood had been plagued by issues of environmental degradation since years ago. The community gardens were one of the key initiatives that Karen had implemented as head honcho of the HOA. With a passion for gardening and sustainability, she believed in nurturing local plants to combat soil erosion, reduce carbon footprint, and promote biodiversity. The garden was not only a place where residents could come together to grow their food, but also an educational hub offering workshops on composting, permaculture design, and organic farming. However, Karen's dedication had its limits as her own lawn continued to decay year after year due to neglect from the Homeowners Association, HOA. The grass was thinning rapidly, while mailboxes were rusted and overgrown with weeds. Despite multiple attempts by neighborhood maintenance teams to clean up the neglected spaces, there remained a sense of impasse. One day, Karen received a call from her neighbor, Lisa, who had noticed an issue with their mailbox on one corner of her street. The box was empty, but it appeared that some mail had been stolen or misplaced over recent weeks. Concerned and frustrated, Lisa approached Karen to discuss the matter further. As they sat down in front of their respective gardens, Karen couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come as a community leader. Lisa shared her memories of an incident where someone had reported missing letters from a neighbor who lived across the street. The mail was particularly important because it contained crucial information about upcoming legal proceedings related to a lawsuit that the HOA was involved in against Karen's development partner, a large corporation. The case concerned environmental pollution caused by the corporation's industrial activities and an alleged violation of local codes. Lisa's story hit Karen hard as she realized how much impact her own neglect had on not only her community, but also its legal standing. She understood that every action taken within a HOA had consequences beyond just aesthetic appeal, especially when it came to environmental issues such as pollution and habitat destruction. Determined to make things right, Karen approached the HOA management board with Lisa's concerns, urging them to investigate the missing mail issue thoroughly. To her surprise, they agreed to hold an open meeting to discuss the matter at length and address the neighborhood's grievances. During the meeting, Karen presented a comprehensive report that detailed the extent of the environmental damage caused by her development partner's activities. She highlighted the lack of maintenance on the lawns, mailbox overgrowth, soil erosion, and pollution levels in nearby streams and parks. The HOA board members were taken aback by these findings, but ultimately decided to take action. The first step was a comprehensive inspection of all properties within the community, including Karen's development site. They found that several areas had been neglected for years due to lack of attention or resources from the HOA. This included broken down storm drains, overflowing gutters, and weeds growing unchecked in the streets. As part of the cleanup efforts, the HOA established a task force consisting of maintenance staff, landscaping experts, environmental scientists, and legal counsel. Together, they worked tirelessly on rectifying these issues, ensuring that each property was properly maintained and protected from potential harm. The first priority was to address the issue with the mailboxes, which required significant renovations to improve security measures. A new mailbox system was installed with a tamper-proof locking mechanism, CCTV cameras, and sensors to detect any unauthorized access or theft attempts. In addition to repairing the mailboxes, the HOA also worked on addressing soil erosion by implementing green infrastructure techniques such as rain gardens, bioswales, and permeable pavement. These measures helped absorb excess water from stormwater runoff and prevent it from reaching nearby rivers, streams, and parks, which in turn reduced pollution levels. Karen's development partner was held accountable for their environmental impact through a formal hearing before the local community council. The corporation presented a comprehensive plan to address the allegations of violation, including investing in renewable energy sources, implementing environmentally friendly practices at their operations, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. During the meeting, Karen stood as an advocate for sustainable living, emphasizing the importance of collective action towards environmental conservation and protecting our planet's ecosystems. She emphasized that every individual effort counts, from recycling to conserving water to using eco-friendly products. The HOA board members listened intently to her arguments, nodding in agreement with her stance on environmental responsibility. They agreed to implement several initiatives aimed at reducing the corporation's impact on the environment and promoting green living within their community. As Karen stood there, surrounded by smiling faces of residents who had come together to address a pressing issue that threatened not only their neighborhood, but also its legal standing, she knew that her journey from an HOA chair fine-spun with neglect to an advocate for environmental conservation was far from over. She continued to inspire others with her stories of triumphs and challenges as they worked towards creating a better future for all by addressing the root causes of environmental degradation in their communities. As Karen looked out at the vibrant gardens, blooming flowers, and lush trees that surrounded them, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. She knew that her legacy would continue through these small acts of justice and compassion, as they empowered others to take action towards creating a cleaner, greener world. The sun began setting on Karen's peaceful suburban neighborhood, casting long shadows across its winding streets. The community garden was bustling with activity, with residents tending their plants, chatting under the colorful flowers, and enjoying a warm summer evening breeze. As she looked out at her beloved surroundings, Karen couldn't help but feel content in knowing that every effort towards environmental conservation had made an impact on her community's future. Karen continued to walk down the winding streets of her suburban neighborhood, feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride in what she had accomplished. She knew that there were still many challenges ahead, but with each act of justice and compassion she inspired others to take on, they began to make small changes that could have a big impact on their community's environment. One day, as Karen was walking through the community garden, she noticed an elderly woman struggling to tend her tomato plants. The plant had been left unattended for weeks due to neglect by the previous owner. As she approached, Karen realized that the woman's hands were raw and bleeding from picking out damaged tomatoes from a pile of debris. Without hesitation, Karen offered to help the woman with the garden chores. She carefully removed the compost heap, cleaned up the soil, and tended to each plant one at a time. The older woman was touched by her kindness, thanking her for her efforts without words. As they worked together, Karen shared stories about how environmental degradation had affected their communities and how small actions could make a big difference. Over the next few weeks, Karen continued to help those in need within the community garden, working with families on composting initiatives, planting trees, and organizing cleanup drives for local litter. She became an advocate for environmental conservation, sharing her knowledge and skills with others through workshops and presentations at neighborhood events. Word of Karen's efforts spread throughout the community, inspiring others to take action towards creating a cleaner, greener world. Local businesses started offering eco-friendly products and services, while schools began incorporating outdoor education into their curriculum. As more people became aware of the impact that environmental degradation had on their communities, they joined forces with Karen in advocating for change. As Karen continued her journey, she faced numerous challenges along the way. Some neighbors were skeptical about the benefits of eco-friendly practices or resistant to changing their habits altogether. Others were intimidated by the potential consequences of climate change and struggled to find resources or support. But Karen remained steadfast in her commitment to creating a better future for all.